All right, so our next exercise, we're going to go over a classic Express checkout integration using Checkout.js. But before we start our exercise, we need to go over the HTTP library that is included in Checkout.js. So if we look at the source for this library, we'll see that there is a request function that can be used to make any request, as well as get and post helper methods. So if I look at the actual source code here, you'll see that we are exporting the request function. So you could call this function and give it a URL, a method, and everything that it requires there. And it also has a get and post helper methods. So you could call request.get and request.post. All right, so we can use this library to make AJAX calls. The library is located on the global PayPal object on the request property. So open your Chrome console and execute the following AJAX call. You'll see we'll do paypal.request.get and give it a URL endpoint. This is in your training application. And then that returns a promise, so we're going to say then go ahead and output the data, console.logit. So I'm going to do that real quick. All right, so if we go to the console tab, clear that, and we will say paypal.request.get PayPal classic set express checkout then all right, so when I execute this, it should make an AJAX request to that endpoint. All right, so then you'll see the response back from the AJAX call that I just made. And we should be able to see that in the network tab. So you'll see that I just executed a get call to the PayPal Classic Set Express Checkout endpoint. If I click on that, I can see all the headers as well as preview the response. All right. So exercise 6 overview. So we have a current PayPal merchant integrated on Classic Express Checkout that wants to upgrade their existing integration to use Checkout.js. They're converting their checkout flow to a single page application, and they don't want any redirects. They don't want to change their backend processing to use REST APIs. So, real quick, just ask ourselves, where would we execute the Set Express checkout call, the Get Express checkout call, and the Do Express checkout call? So I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. All right, so we would want to execute the Set Express checkout in the payment callback, because that's where we're actually getting a token. Then we would execute the Get Express checkout in the OnAuthorize callback, because that is where we are getting the response back, and we can make that additional AJAX call to get the information we need. And then we would execute the Do Express checkout on click of the submit button when they click, place order or whatever that button would be on the confirmation form. So now let's navigate to the client checkout classic.html file and finish the client side integration. All right, so part 1 of this exercise is Set Express Checkout. So we're going to use what we just learned about the request library included with checkout.js to solve this problem. So let's locate the part 1 section in classic HTML. Go ahead and pause the video and take a couple minutes to try and solve this part on your own. Follow the inline comments to complete. All right, if you haven't done so, go ahead and pause the video now because I'm about ready to go through the answers. So let me switch back over to the training application and open up the classic.html file. I'm going to locate part 1. It says complete the setExpressCheckout function. So we can also see that the on payment callback is set to the setExpressCheckout function. So we already know that this needs to return a token. It says use the PayPal library to call the setExpressCheckout API endpoint. And then in the callback, return the token property of the response. So we are going to call the PayPal.request .get. So we're making a get method request to the endpoint listed here. All right, and this says in the callback, return the token property of the response. So we know that the request library returns a promise. So we're going to say then, and we're going to do function data, which is the response of the AJAX call. So right now I don't currently know what data is. So there's a couple options that I have to figure out what exactly is happening in data. We're also going to have to return the promise that the get function returns. So a couple options that I have on how to figure out what data actually is. I could console.logit. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And then we will go to classic example. So this would output it to the console. So that's one option that I do have. Another option is I could set a breakpoint in the setExpressCheckout return. So I could set a breakpoint here, and that would tell me. I could also switch it over into the iframe scope and actually execute the payment call like we did in the last exercise. So now if I refreshed my application here, I should be able to render PayPal. And we see that we got to sandbox and then it rendered. So we know that our payment callback function is correct. All right, so that should be it for the first portion of our exercise. And here's the answer. If you didn't get a chance to complete it, go ahead and pause and complete it now. Otherwise, we're going to move on to part 2 of this exercise. So part 2, getExpressCheckout. So let's locate the part 2 section in the classic.html. Go ahead and pause the video now and take a couple minutes to try and solve this part on your own. Follow the inline comments to complete. All right, if you haven't already paused the video, the video, please do so now. So I'm about to go through the answer. So if we go back to the training application and locate part 2, see it's the GetExpress checkout function. So we want to use the PayPal library to call the GetExpress checkout API endpoint located at this URL, and then your token is the actual Express checkout token. So in order to do that, I am going to have to use the PayPal library to execute an AJAX call. So I'm going to do PayPal dot, and I actually want to return it, so we'll do return PayPal dot request dot get. We want to send a get request to the PayPal /classic / get express checkout / checkout. And then the last part is the actual token. Well, I currently don't know what token is unless we go back to the deep dive section. So in order to figure out what token is, I'm just going to go ahead and find this GetExpress checkout call in the application and set a breakpoint so I can figure out what data is and what property I need in order to execute GetExpress checkout. We got to figure out what token is. So let me go through here and set a quick breakpoint. I'm going to remove the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh my page to get the changes I made in. We're going to set a breakpoint here. Hopefully stop our application when we execute GetExpress checkout, because we need to know what data is. We need to figure out what the token property is. All right, so you'll see that my application paused here on my breakpoint, and we can see the data dot payment token. So this is our token parameter. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to add it onto the URL here. Data dot be data dot payment token. All right, and then it says then call the form populate with the function as the response. So we're going to do dot then form populate. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and save. So now when I go through, I'm going to have to refresh, but we should see that our form is now being populated. You'll see my form here is now being populated. All right, so that is the answer to the second part of this exercise. If you haven't yet got it copied down, go ahead and take a moment and do that right now. Otherwise, we are going to move on to the third part of our exercise, which is the DoExpress checkout API call. So let's locate the part 3 section in the classic.html. Go ahead and pause this video and take a couple minutes and try and solve this part on your own. follow the inline comments to complete this exercise. All right, if you haven't done so, please pause and complete this exercise because I'm about ready to go through the answer. All right, so I'm going to go back to our training application and locate part 3. And it says, complete the doExpress checkout function. Set the MVP params properties to the correct properties in data. Once again, we really don't know what data is. So in order to figure that out, I'm just going to go ahead and set a breakpoint. And this time I'm going to do it in our doExpress checkout function. I'm going to refresh the page. So now we're going to stop in the doExpress checkout function. When we click the place order, all right, so let's figure out what data has to offer. We see there's an intent, a payment token, and a payer ID. So that is what we need to set our MVP params to, is data.intent, payer ID, and payment token. All right, so it will be data.payment token, and then data.payer ID, and data.intent. All right, so then it says use the PayPal library to call the doExpress checkout API endpoint, which this time is a post call. So we're going to say PayPal.request.post, and then this is the endpoint. All right, and then we need to pass the MVP params. And then we're going to call the handle response function with the response from the API call. So we can just say then handle response. And we also need to add our return so that we return the promise. All right, and that shouldn't be executed. All right, and that should be what we need for the doExpress checkout call. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. And we should be able to go through the full transaction now. So we pre-populated our form, and now when I click place order, we should see a success. And we have a success. All right, so that's it for the third part of our exercise, and that should solve our entire integration. Here's the answer to the part 3. So if you haven't had a chance to get that in there yet, go ahead and take a moment to do that. And then you should be able to go through the entire payment flow, and you will get an actual successful response. And that is it for exercise 6. Our next exercise will be a classic express checkout with a full page redirect.